Hi guys, this is Jay Thompson. I also go by JTom1. You might see me on the Twitch channel when Jason does his live stuff. If you see me on the forums, I just go by Jay Thompson. I've noticed a lot of people asking how to get Launchbox and Rocket Launcher to work. I'm going to try to do a little video here just to demonstrate how to get everything going. I've installed Launchbox on a separate external drive, and haven't done anything with it yet. And I'm just doing this separate from my other stuff because I don't want to mess with my other install. I've also gone ahead and installed Rocket Launcher in a folder on my external drive here. You see I got Rocket Launcher installed and Launchbox here, and then this is just some other stuff that I've got on my drive that, well, you know, it's my drive, so I've just got extra stuff on there. Anyhow, let's get started. With a fresh Launchbox install, you know, you're gonna want to put your ROM files for whatever game it is. So the first thing after, well, I guess it's not really the first thing. I'm going to show you Rocket Launcher first, but we're going to do the ROM files in Launchbox. But I forgot that we have to set up the emulator, and I haven't shown you the emulator yet. So the emulator, of course, is Rocket Launcher. So if we go back over to the Rocket Launcher folder, the first thing you need to know when you if you've never had done anything with Rocket Launcher, you'll see when you install Rocket Launcher in its own folder here. Basically, you're just extracting it from a zip file, an archive folder, and you're putting the Rocket Launcher folder that's in that folder wherever you want it, so it can be portable, basically. When you open it, first thing you'll see is a Rocket Launcher exe. Now don't get excited, don't start clicking on this because it's not going to do anything. Basically, this Rocket Launcher exe is going to be what Launchbox calls. Basically, it's telling it it's an emulator. It's not really an emulator, it's more like an in-between between the front end and your emulator. So this is what Launchbox is going to call on, and then Rocket Launcher exe is going to open stuff for you, open the emulators, open the ROMs and all that. What you really want to be messing with is the Rocket Launcher UI, which is in this folder. And I think some people might get confused with that, so I just wanted to show you that right off the bat. When you do install the Rocket Launcher from their web page where you download that program Rocket Launcher, if you go down to the bottom of the page, you'll see this archive password. You're going to want this password. It's just www.rlauncher.com. That will open the zip file or the archive folder so you can actually extract it. I guess I probably should have said that first. At any rate, so this is our Rocket Launcher UI and our Rocket Launcher folder. So when we go back into Launchbox and I do set up Rocket Launcher, we're going to point to that folder. So let's go ahead and import our ROMs. And I just set up one folder on my external drive here in the emulators folder. I just set up the Sega Master System. Yeah, let's see. I'm gonna Control A to select all these. And basically, you're gonna do the import your ROMs and stuff just like you would do on any other system. If you want more help with that kind of stuff, you're probably better off looking at the official Launchbox tutorials. There's tons of videos on how to import your ROMs. I'm just going to do a quick and dirty import for these guys just to show you, so we can get into the nitty-gritty of Rocket Launcher. So if we go down here to Sega Master System, and then we're going to choose an emulator, and you can see there's nothing set up here, so we're going to add, and Rocket Launcher just happens to be one of the emulators that will pre-populate on a fresh install. That was nice of Jason to do. And you can see we got our default command line parameters here, emulator name. Now all we have to do is add the emulator application path, and that would be in our drive here, rocket launcher, and that's going to be just the rocket launcher exe as opposed to the user interface. We'll get into the user interface here in a minute, but let's set up the exe as the application path. Click OK, click Next, use the files in the current location. I am actually not going to import any media just for the sake of getting these ROMs imported quickly so we can deal with the other stuff. Okay, so you can see it's ready to import all these. Now once all these are imported, what it's doing is it's creating inside the XML file that Rocket Launchbox uses. It uses several XML files, but one of the XML files is going to have all the games in it, just basically like a list. And what Rocket Launcher is going to do is it's going to look at that list and it's going to populate everything that you've already imported into Launchbox. It's going to get imported into Rocket Launcher via that XML. Okay, so we have got the games here. It looks like it picked up on some pictures here. I'm not sure. It must have been when I was messing around with it earlier. So basically, if we click on something, see, I haven't even messed with Rocket. I haven't even opened Rocket Launcher yet, so it's wanting this command here. It's going to give me an error because I haven't set anything up in Rocket Launcher yet. This is actually Rocket Launcher right here telling us, giving us that error. Okay, we've got this system loaded, so I'm going to go back over to the Rocket Launcher user interface, and we'll open that up. Rocket Launcher was actually used to be called a Hyper Launch, and it was part of the Hyperspin. Now, first time you open this, it's going to say the updates are detected, unless the updates have already been applied to the download that you got. Go ahead and do the updates. And what this is going to do is it's going to update all the modules that run Rocket Launcher. Basically, one of the modules, really what it is a series of auto hotkey files and other assorted files. But a lot of these auto hotkey, what they'll do is they will look at what you are trying to load, and it's kind of hard to explain. They'll pass keystrokes to the program. They do tons of stuff, just a lot of behind the scenes. They'll do the bezels, it does the fades, the hyper pause menu. It does all that stuff. All those are inside these hotkey AHK files. Okay, so let's apply these. I'll get back to the modules here in a minute. It might take a while to do this. Looks like there's quite a few of them. So I will pause this video and we will come back in a second. Okay, so Rocket Launcher has been updated, and I've restarted it. The first thing that you need to do, whatever front end you're using, GameX, Hyperspin, Launchbox, RetroFE, whichever one that you're using with Rocket Launcher, you're going to have to set the front end up so Rocket Launcher knows what to look at, what XML files to look at. So if you go over here to the Rocket Launcher UI tab, you click the green plus sign here, and in this box you're going to add the name of the front end, Launchbox, set up the path, tell it where Launchbox is, and in my case I'm going to point it to Big Box. And then for the Rocket Launcher UI plugin, you click the box here and select Launchbox, and you can see all the different front ends that it has here. And you click Launchbox for both of these, and you click Save. Okay, so now we have Launchbox as a front end in Rocket Launcher. but it is not set as default. So click on this, select it, and then click this button here. This sets it as the default front end. And then click this button here. That sets it as the active front end. And when I made it active, you saw what happened over here. This Sega Master System populated in the emulators list over here. And what's doing right now is Launchbox is looking at the XML file that I'm sorry, did I say Launchbox? Rocket Launcher is looking at the XML file that Launchbox created for the Sega Master System. And if we click on this and we go to games, you'll see there's nothing here. I can click audit the games for the system, and you'll see that they're all red here. That means it doesn't necessarily know where the ROMs are. It knows that there should be ROMs, but they're red. And what we want to do is we want to make these green. When they're green, that means that they're ready to go, ready to be launched. So the first thing that we do is go to the global tab, or the global setting here, make sure that's selected. Click emulators tab, and we're going to set up our first emulator. Now, even though we have the emulator here, remember, this is just looking, this is Rocket Launcher looking at the XML that Launchbox created. So it's a little confusing, but just remember that it's just looking at the XML files in this list. But in this emulators tab, this is going to be populated with all the emulators that you're going to have to set up in Rocket Launcher as well. So the first thing we do is we click Add New Emulator. Name the emulator what you want it to be called. In this case, Sega Master System. And something you need to remember, make sure you name these exactly how they're named in the front end. Otherwise it's going to have a hard time with it. Set the path to the emulator that's going to run the Sega Master System, and there's different emulators you can use for Sega Master System. We are going to use RetroArch, and I've already got RetroArch set up right here. Always click RetroArch EXE. ROM extensions. That's going to be, for this system, I believe it's 7Z is what they are. Something I should point out, all these little eye things here, you can hover your mouse over them and it'll give you like some little hints. And this is saying all the ROM extensions that the emulator supports, make sure you separate multiple extensions with the pipe character. And you notice that there's no .7z, .sms, whatever, it's just separating with the pipe symbol. So 7z, pipe symbol, and then I believe SMS is the other one that the Sega Master System uses. Module. This is going to be an auto hotkey file that the creators of Rocket Launcher have created to run and launch RetroArch. So basically, you click that icon, and you're going to go and look for RetroArch. Here it is, RetroArch AHK. It's an auto hotkey file. These other things you do not have to fill in for RetroArch, but they might come in for other emulators that you might have to set up. But for our purposes, we just need to fill out these first four. Go ahead and click the save icon. Now you can see we have Sega Master System set up here. Because we are using 7-zip, we have to tell we have to tell Rocket Launcher that we're using 7-zip. So make sure global is highlighted and go to settings, and you can see in the global, the default settings for the global, that 7-zip enabled is false. Now I recommend leaving global, leaving everything set as default. It just makes it's a good baseline. If everything's default and you know how everything is supposed to be set up, just leave it that way. When you go to click on your emulator itself, you're going to want to make sure that you set 7-zip to true if you're using 7-zip. Otherwise, the ROM is not going to open because it's just going to crap out. It's going to say, "Oh, this is a weird file. I don't know what to do with it," and it won't do anything with it unless you tell it to open it with 7-zip first. So make sure 7-zip is enabled. We're going to go back to the games tab. On the System Audit tab within the Games tab, you're going to click this little blue thing here, and you can see this stuff is still red, so I still have not done something. What have I missed? Oh, I have not set up the emulator. Okay, so even though Rocket Launcher can see our XML from Launchbox, and it sees the Sega Master System, it sees all the games, we still haven't set the emulator up within Rocket Launcher. So the first thing we do is we set, let me see here. I'm getting ahead of myself here. We did set it up. What we did not do is set the ROM path. Okay, so we set the ROM path here. To the ROM path of the emulator. And Sega Master System is already selected here. So now when we go back over to games and do the audit, it should see, yes it does, it sees all the games. So now what happens if I audit these, everything's in green instead of red. So the emulator was set up, I just hadn't set the ROM path. So Rocket Launcher can be very confusing. I've been using it for 2 or 3 years now, and I'm still baffled sometimes by how powerful it is, but how what is the word for it? It's not very user friendly. You really have to dig around and mess around with this stuff quite a bit to figure it out. But basically, let's go back to games. You can see now when we do the audit, all the ROMs are in green now. So we can select one, launch with the little launch icon, and it should launch the game. That is a very basic rundown of how to get Rocket Launcher installed to work with Launchbox. I hope I did not confuse you guys more with this than help. Hopefully this will give you a starting point. There's so much you can do with Rocket Launcher. You see these other tabs? There's this thing called Pause. It used to be called Hyper Pause to go with the Hyperspin theme, but they just call it Pause now, the Rocket Launcher Pause. You can click on Pause and change the appearance of all these pause buttons. So what happens in pause is when you press your pause key, whatever it might be in the emulator, and it'll be different for every emulator, you can have these options such as save and load state menu, and I'm going to go ahead and just select a couple of these. Save load state, I guess I should enable it for this system too. Sound, you can like adjust the volume after you hit pause. Shutdown, I mean there's all these different things. You can have a moves list, stats menus, you can play videos within the pause. Here, let me show you what pause does. So you click on one of these games. Pause key. Do not have set up. Let me see if we can set up pause real quick. Input. I do not like RetroArch. Pause is P. I thought I pressed P. Oh, it's not set up within Rocket Launcher. So that's something else that you have to set up. You have to set up all your you have to set up your key mapper, auto hotkey, general settings. Where is it? There's a place in here where you set up all your keys for each emulator. Module game, rocket launcher, controls. Okay, so to get into pause, the activation key is numpad add. Let's change that to, let's delete this, I'll change it to just the pause key. Capture hotkey. Okay, and save it. And when we go back into our game, I should be able to go into the pause menu. Yes, okay. So here is the pause menu of Rocket Launcher. And you can set up, okay, here's the sound menu. You can set up adjust the volume here and whatnot. Stats, you can set up game stats or look at game stats, how many times you played it, all that stuff if that's what you're into. I don't really care about that kind of stuff. You can see the settings, what kind of settings you have set up for this particular system. Shut down. Save state and load states. Now this is something you'll have to set up on a case-by-case basis, and it can be kind of daunting. But once you get save state and load state set up, it is really pretty neat because you can play through games that are really hard. You're basically cheating. You can start a game that you might have played a game when you were 10 years old that you just played it until your fingers were bloody, and you could never beat this game. But you can go and you can save the state, and I'm sure with emulators you guys have saved stuff before, but this integrates it right into the game. And if you're playing on like a cabinet or something, oh, it makes it so easy to just press a pause key and go into the save menu, and then you can, if you die, you can just go and load that save state. It's really amazing. Okay, let's exit out of here. Other things that you can do with Rocket Launcher, go back into the settings tab. Look at all these tabs you got. You got all these fade menus and stuff. Let's set this fade to true, and we'll just use the global settings. I think the global settings, everything's already set up, but for just the emulator itself, we're going to make sure that it's enabled. And then the fade out, we're going to make sure it's enabled. I think it's going to be just a generic fade. So here's what happens when you use fade.
Loading complete.
That's kind of a quick down and dirty showing how fade works. You can there's all kinds of settings for the fade. You can make it the delay, you can make it last longer, you can actually change those fade screens to use something else. There is a Rocket Launcher media pack that you can download that has all this stuff. Bezels, there's built-in bezel support, and I think that's part of the media pack. I don't know that a bezel is going to work on a game without the media pack. Let me try it and see.
Loading complete.
Bezel set up, it doesn't look like. There's so much you can do with Rocket Launcher. It's really cool. Well, I hope that helped you guys. If you have any questions, go to the Rocket Launcher forum, because there's way too much for me to try to help with every single little thing you guys are going to want to know. You're going to run into so many problems. I'll tell you a hint. If you go to Rocket Launcher and you say, hey, this isn't working, the first thing that those guys are going to say is post a log. And I'll show you how to do a log. General settings, go to global, logger. Okay, so you got this logger, and this is on your general tab of global or of just the emulator itself. Set the logging level, and they're going to say set it to troubleshooting, probably is what they're going to say. So set this to troubleshooting, and then what you do is you run the game, and then whatever error it throws, it will show up over here in this log viewer on this tab. Now let's try loading a game with the logging running.
Loading complete.
Okay, so that should have logged, should have done a log file. We can go back over here to the log viewer, and let's see which one of these. Reload log data. And this is what the rocket launcher, if you go to their forum, they're going to want this log. Because if you say, hey, so and such didn't load, they're going to say, well, where's your log file? And that's going to be the first thing that those guys say. And they might even sound kind of like jerks, because that's going to be the first thing they say. But you know, these guys deal with this on a day-to-day basis. Everybody's like, oh, I can't get this to work, I can't get that to work. Where's your log file? Make sure you post a log file, and don't post it on the forum. Post it in paste bin, and then add a link to that paste bin file, and just add that into the forum post, and then they'll take a look at it, and they can tell you what's wrong. Hopefully they can tell you what's wrong, or what setting you haven't checked, or whatever it is that you need to do. And then when you are done, make sure that you turn the logging back off. Alright guys, I am not sure what else I can show you right now. I mean, that's kind of just a real quick down and dirty how to set this thing up. I wish it was easier, but if you get the steps down, you know, install the stuff in Launchbox first, and then set up Rocket Launcher as the emulator. Come over here, make sure that Launchbox is set up as your front end, and when you click, you know, make sure that they're active, they're default. Then your emulator should pop up over here. Now remember, that's only reading the XML from Launchbox. You still have to set up the actual emulator. So you click this, set up the emulator with the name that's going to match what it's reading from the name from Launchbox, from that XML. Make sure that matches, and then it's going to want the location of the executable that's going to run that, and that's going to be RetroArch or desmume or MAME or whatever it is. Make sure all that stuff is set up right. Make sure you have in settings, make sure you have 7-zip enabled if you need it. If you're not using it, then obviously you don't need it. And then oh yeah, when you're setting up the emulator, make sure that you point the correct module to whatever actual emulator you're using, RetroArch, desmume, whatever. Make sure that module matches. Games, when you get over here, make sure you click the audit, and then you can click on one of those, and then you should be able to launch it with this little rocket. Modules, there's something helpful here in the modules I should show you real quick. If you go into the modules, this shows you all modules that will work with Sega Master System. If we go to global, it should show you all the modules globally that are installed with all the modules that are installed with Rocket Launcher, but we're just going to show you the ones for Sega Master System here real quick. So the one that we are using is RetroArch. This is how amazing Rocket Launcher is. They've got support for all this stuff: MES, Mednafin, MAME, you name it. So there's stuff you can look at in here too. You can look at the notes. This is very helpful. You go to RetroArch, you click on that, view the notes. It'll tell you what you might need for certain systems. This is probably, before you even ask for help on the forum, this is what I would look at, is this this guy right here. There's notes for all these things here. You can also, you could actually edit these if you wanted to right here, but we don't need to do that. Alright guys, I've got a dry throat. I am going to finish here. Good luck, guys.
Loading game. Loading complete.